on our YouTube. And so you'll be able to view this or share this with people that might be interested in the future. So please allow me to introduce Dr. Ward. Dr. Ward is an associate professor of business administration at Milligan University, a part-time consultant, and hosts the Business Sense with Brad podcast. Prior to academia, he worked in automotive manufacturing with roles such as quality control team leader, field supervisor, and quality engineer. During this time, he noticed that most employees were not thriving. After he transitioned into academia, he came across colleagues who were also miserable at work. This prompted him to study employee motivation, ultimately discovering Herzberg's time-tested two-factor theory and writing the book, The Motivated Worker. In this session, Dr. Ward will unpack the two-factor theory and demonstrate how it can be used to motivate the modern employee. Examples from both academic and practitioner literature will be presented. Participants will be able to take initial steps to improve job satisfaction in their workplace. The nuances between engagement and motivation will be addressed. So, Dr. Ward, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
All right, thanks. Sounds like a thrilling topic we got here. So I'm going to also ask after we get started what issues you guys are seeing today as well. So this will be a little bit participative, if you will. I'll try to share my screen and see how that goes. I'm not sure if you're seeing are you just seeing the presentation or the notes too?
So far, just the slides.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so again, I was asked to present on this topic, which I'm extremely passionate about. I published my book with McFarland. Of course, it came out right when COVID hit, so that was kind of a bummer as far as when it came out. It was like 2020 in the fall. But anyway, I want to talk about today the origins of two-factor theory, if it's still relevant. I don't know if any of you have even heard of it. Some of you may have heard of this theory. I would say this theory is definitely not like it's not perfect, but I really like how it addresses motivation. I think it's quite robust. It's not, again, no model when we simplify reality is perfect, but it's my favorite motivational theory by far. So we'll talk about if it's still relevant today since it came out in like the 50s. Is it still relevant today? And then we'll compare it with employee engagement. When I actually tried publishing the book, it was double-blind reviewed, and one of the reviewers was like, well, motivation's old hat. Let's talk about engagement. And so I had to kind of defend why I wanted to hold on to the motivational theory piece. And so I'll unpack that. Most of you have probably heard of engagement more so than motivation, or maybe you think they're interchangeable terms. So we'll talk about that. Okay, so here's why I like two factors so much. Personally, I've worked all kinds of jobs. So a very blue collar upbringing. I used to mow lawns in like sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. I worked I was a bus boy in a restaurant. I worked in a lumber yard. And then after college, I got into automotive manufacturing, and I became more, I guess, white collar there, but I was still in manufacturing. And then, of course, now I'm a professor. But I noticed wherever I went, it didn't matter what the industry was. And my wife's also a nurse. So I talked to her and she's like, yeah, nursing turnover is always high. When I go into higher ed, I've worked in both union and non-union higher ed, and it doesn't matter. I've always had miserable coworkers at both. Um, and I've in the factory, same thing. It's like, why is there always at least a certain percentage of workers who just are not thriving and they're not enjoying their jobs? Is it like a personality fit issue? Is it pay? What is it? So again, across industries, I've seen this, and I've also noticed some generational differences, which I'm a little reluctant to overstate generational differences, but they still are important. And so uh, that's kind of what got me into writing this book and studying it. So Just open it up here. We can just have a few of you chime in here if you would. What kind of motivation issues are you seeing, and is there any generational component to it? And does anybody just want to weigh in? For time's sake, I'll try to keep it under 5 minutes. Does anyone want to weigh in? And I can't control or let's see, it says chat. So responsibility. Yeah, so intrinsic, so you're seeing the intrinsic side. Yes, that's important. Obviously, if they don't like what they're doing, it's really hard to I guess improve someone's job satisfaction if there's no internal drive, if you will, or I guess that's what you were saying. Anyone else?
Sort of fatigue when you have to do the same thing over and over again, and sometimes it seems like there's no acceptable results from your efforts.
Boredom. Yes, that's I actually had a boss in higher ed who every single year he said, okay, we'd have a meeting and he'd say, yes, now you did a great job last year. Let's increase your productivity by 1% this year. So every year was the goalpost moved. And so so the goal we were chasing was always movable. I don't know if that ties in, but it doesn't matter what you do. It's not good enough because it's going to get moved next year. And boredom is definitely a huge part of the problem. Let's see here. I'm going to try to skim through these without, let's see, where are we at here? No intrinsic. Okay, so no immediate feedback. Was that right, Joanne? Is that kind of immediate feedback? Burnout, boredom. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Kierkegaard, by the way, as far as his boredom. I'm a big I have issues with existentialism, so I'm big on the boredom train. Now let's take on new things. Yeah, one thing with the pandemic too that I've noticed is, especially in graduate school, we used to have students come to campus like every Saturday or one Saturday every 5 weeks, and now everyone wants Zoom or virtual learning. And then of course I think I don't know if that's tied into this, but like the things have changed. And it's hard to get students to come in and learn new things, if you will. Motivated to do the job. Boredom comes up. Yes, boredom is so that's what I might write a book on next if I don't get, I don't know, I'd probably be bored writing it. Okay, someone with authority around. Okay, well, there's a lot here. I didn't know we were gonna get all these. I don't want you guys just to see me reading. Okay, so anyway, go through go through I guess I won't be able to read all these. So go ahead and just read through those, and if anything comes up, I'm going to try to address these in general. I didn't know I was going to have so much participation. I just don't want you guys to see me reading. So, okay. So this is the good thing here is that I think we can all relate to this topic. So what I want to talk about is, especially on the boredom side, why we're so bored. But generally speaking, I want to talk about the labor market first. So when I got out of college, my undergrad was like 2003. And I lived in Battle Creek, Michigan, and Denso Manufacturing is where I kind of got my start, which they're owned by Toyota. And to get hired in there, so we're talking '03, I had a bachelor degree. The year to get, I had to wait over probably a year to year and a half to even try to get hired in, and I'd have to work as a temporary employee. And you'd have temporary employees working, no joke, 7 days a week, 14-hour days, 14 hours. They would work for over 2 years at barely over minimum wage to even have a shot at getting hired in. And so on the same assembly line, you would have workers getting paid almost double that were hired in. And so that's how the job market was as far as both unemployment participation. Like workers were like fighting to get in. Well, as Michael Scott on The Office said, how the turntables. So the tables have turned. And if you look at this graph, so '04 is kind of what I was talking about. And this labor participation, we're talking about people that are working age that are choosing to work. So it's not necessarily unemployment where you're just looking at people that are trying to work, but these are working age that could work that are choosing to. So it's a little different than unemployment, but look at this. Here's the recession here of 07 to 09. So you see a start going down here, and then baby boomer retirement. But what we've seen, and again, we're only talking a few percentage points, but when you're talking millions of workers, this really adds up. And then, of course, pandemic. And then this, one of the comments said, post-pandemic, we've been seeing different kinds of, I don't know, employee demands or uh, different expectations. But look at how far participation's gone down. That means it's this the employer now, if you go to the same factory I was at, they are hiring people, you know, $20 an hour to start to do menial labor, where before you would work as $7.50 an hour. And that's not, I mean, I worked for $7.50 an hour for a little while in there. I just couldn't get myself to do the 714 days thing. But it's totally flipped. You can get hired in tomorrow. And so the employers have the power, or the employees have the power now versus the employer. And so if you're looking for work, you have less competition going in. Long story short. So post-COVID stats, let's see, I'm just pulling my clock up here so I can keep myself paced. Okay, so we have 2 million fewer workers than predicted post-COVID that have checked out. We had 50 plus million quits in 2022. People that are just said, we're not going back into the workforce. Again, we've seen this in higher ed too, and the shift has been more towards remote work or remote degrees. And the reasons why, from a couple studies or sources here, company culture was one reason. They just didn't like where they worked. Work-life balance, 91% of employees who, I believe it was this Brookings Institute survey, wanted flexible or hybrid work. Again, no 9 to 5, and then compensation. So these are some of the big reasons. But this is just kind of the environment we're in. And if you couple in generational differences, this is important as far as the theory goes. And so, for example, when two-factor theory, the theory I'm going to talk about, was written, it was during the traditionalist era. So they're roughly 76 years old now. And the big thing with them, of course, if we were just looking at major events in life, you had world wars going on. Most of the motivational theory was coming out, which we'll talk about in the next slide, during the traditionalist era. And of course, Great Depression was part of that. And then the boomers, when we're talking about just major things going on in life, was more long-term employment, one working spouse. And then I'm kind of feral Gen X. I don't know if anyone else of you feels that way, but I was left on my own, and it shows. But both parents were working. I was left at home a lot. But I went through major technological advances, but slow. So I had the rotary phone growing up. Even in high school, I used a word processor. But even though our school had computers, like I had to actually go to the school for dial-up internet. We didn't have it. And then in college, I remember we got a free CD that we could download dial-up internet on. And now, of course, a Gen Z today, I think smartphones really became popular around 2010 or so. Most of them have never really experienced a world without a smartphone or cell phone at least. And so it's more tech advancements today, just different experiences, different expectations. And I don't like to stereotype generations, but there are differences in how we view the workplace. And so this is, I thought we should note that before moving on. And I'm going to just take a look at the chat real quick. Okay. Okay, you're boomer and two income families. My grandpa was in that. No, he was traditionalist. They were the one. But I think you do see you do see more going into the two income with the boomer generation. But again, these are kind of the stereotype of the generations, if you will. Okay, so let's talk about why we're bored. Some of you may be right now. I'm sorry. So I would argue, let's go back to Adam Smith. I think late 1700s, and we're in Scotland, and people are like, becoming masters at their job, master apprentice relationship. They're becoming, silversmiths or whatever, and they're learning how to do a job from start to finish, and they're the expert in their town, and work is meaningful. Of course, we have farm life and all of those things, but most of the work that you do is in your town. We don't have, rail or any of that. We have shipping and so on, but the modern corporation is in its infancy. And so when Adam Smith is studying this pin factory and the Wealth of Nations, what he noticed, imagine a sewing pin, needle pin, but let's say that we have to take it from a piece of sheet metal. We have to kind of extract it and then roll it, cut it, and then put the hole in it. And let's say before you did every step. So you made one pin, and let's say it took you 4 hours to make one sewing needle pin. Well, what they did with the division of labor is they made each part of that pin, the pointed tip, the cutting, or whatever you do to it, the hole. You only did one little section of the job, but we made lots of pins per day. It actually output exponentially increased, and at the cost of our, I don't know, our need to be human and create things, we got super bored. Obviously, if you're just punching a hole in the needle, that's going to get extremely boring, but we're putting out a lot of them. So it's kind of like the quantity over quality problem. And it just obviously happened today. So our jobs today are very grouped. We don't do jobs, most of us, especially manufacturing, start to finish. I know people who work on assembly lines that don't even know what car their part goes on. Or they might know it's like, oh, this goes on a Camry, but they don't even know how it even hooks in. They just they take one punch, move the part, one punch, move the part. So especially in the factory today, we still see this kind of I don't know, there's a disconnect between the output and what the worker's doing. So what happened after this is Frederick Taylor comes around, and this is going to set up our theory here. So Taylor comes around in the late 1800s. He's the father of scientific management. And he basically was taking all of these jobs. So imagine the pin factory, but now he comes in with the stopwatch. And he's figuring out every single movement you do. So let's say that you take this pin and you pick it up. He would time like the amount of time it even takes you to like twist a little bit, or like every single movement, micro movements would be all timed out. So first of all, you're bored. Now you're going to have someone with the stopwatch making you faster and faster and faster. The processes got faster and faster and faster. And he did this at Ford. So Ford had roughly 400% turnover with the help of Taylor. He had almost 400% employee turnover, I believe, a year, 300 or 400%. And this was after people were coming from all over the world to work for Ford because he was paying $5 a day, which was 5 times the normal wage. People were coming from all over for the pay, and then they'd get bored and leave. Why? Because anyone could do any job within 10 minutes. So at Ford, it was the idea that jobs were so menial, it would take 10 minutes to train anybody to do the job, and then you were an expert at it. So there was work got extremely boring, extremely scienced out, if you will. Now, there were some pushback, like Mary Parker Follett was much more pro-worker than, and she was a very well-known management theorist today anyway. So there was pushback, but a lot of these leaders ruled with like the iron fist. So this industrial, you're part of the machine. It's about speed. If you break your back, that's too bad. We'll find somebody else. And basically all rewards, someone mentioned intrinsic, all of the rewards here are extrinsic, pay for performance. So it was like piece rate, how many can you make? How much can we pay you? Mayo comes along and study at the Hawthorne studies at the Bell Labs. I believe this is like in the 30s. So we're getting from Taylor, late 1800s, early 1900s, and Ford had one of the earliest human resource departments run by a priest. That's a whole different story, but quite interesting if you ever want to look that up. And then Mayo in the 30s comes around. He's studying operators in a factory. And what he notices and what they would do is mess with all of the external things. So they would like make the heat go up and down. And they did this over years, and they make the heat go up and down. They would have the lighting flashing and doing bad things. They would change their lunch breaks at random. And what they found is that productivity went up anyway. And somebody had mentioned when the supervisor's around or not around, what they found is since they were being studied, it didn't matter what happened on the external. If they were being studied and watched, their productivity went up anyway, which was kind of interesting. But so they were only looking at external things. And then Maslow comes along, of course. We all know Maslow probably, especially if you're a boomer or Gen X. Actually, a lot of Gen Z students that I ask about Maslow, I'd say only 25% have heard of him, by the way. If that's did any of you grow up with Maslow in school? Like it was force fed? Like I had Maslow. I don't know if anyone else did. But I think Gen X on up had the Maslow, and now I'd say about 25% of my undergrad have heard of him. 75% have no idea who Maslow is. So just a note. Yes. So now I like Maslow. Okay, yeah, millennial. I'm on the Gen X millennial border, depending on what issue we're talking about. Okay, so I wanted to talk about Maslow really quick, but just put it in working terms, and then we're going to switch to Herzberg. That's why we're all here today, and we're thrilled about Herzberg. So we all know Maslow. We got like our external kind of needs here. These guys are looking at external. And of course, nobody gets thrilled about being safe at home. Like, how many of you are like, wow, my living conditions are awesome? Or how many go to work and say, this is super clean in here. I haven't tripped. I haven't had a trip hazard. Everything's great. Nobody gets really excited about those things, but we do want them. Like pay, for example, we're all thrilled about pay for about a week. And then we just becomes the norm. Or you're not thrilled about your pay. That's even worse. And so that could take away. But if we're looking at this, someone mentioned intrinsic. That's, of course, where we get up into the higher end here. And since we mostly know Maslow, I'm not going to spend too much time here. But I would just like to look at it from a work perspective. We have pay and benefit needs, safe working conditions, our need for like healthy relationships at work. I would say some need this more than others, but none of us want dysfunctional relationships, of course. And then, of course, respect. This one shows up hands down in almost every academic study is the number one motivator. And then career needs like career ladder and so on. Again, if you don't like your job, you won't care about this one per se. All right, so let's take this in mind, but then switch to Herzberg. Okay, so this is why I love Herzberg, and I think it's super relevant today. So my wife, I catch her, I'll sneak around and she'll be on Zillow. And I'm like, come on now. Like we just moved like a year and a half ago, and she's like always on Zillow. So I'm like, okay, what are we looking at? And with Zillow, and there's a Saturday Night Live skit on that Zillow thing, by the way, if none of you have seen it. But so she'll be on Zillow, and I never see her saying, you know what, this house with that foundation looks great. We need to go look at it. It's always something else, right? It's the yard, the kitchen, whatever. However, and I love this house analogy, that if the house is awesome, but you check it out, and let's say that the roof is shot or the foundation shot, then it's a no-go. But the thing that you're interested in is let's say the internals, but these externals still have to be fixed. And so most companies focus here today even on these external things, and you can't really get job satisfaction out of it. So let's take a look at this. One of the companies I consulted for a few months ago, it's a pool company in town, and they only have 11% turnover in manufacturing or in construction, and the annual turnover is roughly 60% in that industry. So I'm going to talk about them in a minute. But he spent like over 10,000 on an employee handbook that was like, done with the lawyer, and he wanted his employees to have the best, policies or whatever. And so when I was interviewing him, I'm like, how do your employees, what do they think of this? And he's like, no one even just looks at it, or nor do they care. But I'm like, but they can feel it, if you will, as far as how the company operates. So nobody is like, wow, I'm so thrilled to go today because our handbook is fair. However, if policies were not implemented properly, they would be dissatisfied. So what Herzberg does that Maslow doesn't get to, but Maslow still has going up and down at different times. You can't go internally motivated if you have major cracks in the foundation. That's why I really like Herzberg. And fixing the foundation does not lead to motivation. These are like things that you take for granted. For example, how many of you are thrilled that you have a competent supervisor? I don't know anyone that's like, my supervisor knows what they're doing. Yes. However, if your supervisor, like, there's studies out there, I think it's like 50% of people typically leave a job because of a bad supervisor. That's kind of what this is saying, is that a bad supervisor will be lead to dissatisfaction, but a good supervisor basically makes you normal. It's like, it's an expectation. Same with company policy. Now, relationships is debatable. I put this one on the line between motivator and not, because I know some people that are motivated because of their coworkers. But I would argue that some internal drive would still get you to leave your job, even if with a healthy relationship. If you have an internal motivator, like the need, like you want to do a certain kind of work, or there's something you want to try out, like a certain kind of job, you would still leave the healthy relationship most likely. Um, but of course, so this is the hygiene side. Salary he puts there, and here's why I would argue he's correct, but I don't think any of these are perfectly dichotomous. For example, how many of you are pumped about your salary, 6 months later? Most of us are looking for cost of living minimum, which, obviously is important, raises and so on, but nobody gets thrilled about their salary after it happens. I've worked with engineers who were like, if I only had 50 cents more an hour or this or that. And again, I'm not saying that they didn't deserve it, but long story short, when I was in higher ed, the place I used to work at Kellogg Community College, and we were unionized, and the pay was amazing. And I'm not going to say anything about where I work now. We'll just put it that way. But still, it didn't matter. Again, I loved it, loved the pay, but I still had miserable workers. Why? Because salary long term was not a motivator. You could say it's like a right or something we expect, but long term, you can't make people happy with it. Job security also, like most of us want to work for an employer that's relevant in the industry, that's not, we know is not going to collapse tomorrow. And also that if we speak up about something and we're, being, legitimate or something, that we're not going to get fired for no reason. So that's kind of the job security, but that's something we want to take for granted. And then of course, working conditions and so on. So if you think about it this way, if you work for a company that just has this, my analogy is that like you live in an efficiency apartment. It's fine. It does what it needs to do. You're not going to be miserable, but it doesn't have any of the frills. This is where if we add these on top of this is where we actually get the intrinsic motivators kicking. And recognition and respect across studies. So I've read lots of studies on this, is about number one across cultures. It doesn't matter what culture you're in. This is almost always number one. The work itself too. This is where like personality fit comes in. For example, I couldn't stand being a quality engineer. I thought it was a great job for someone else. I always felt like I was not a fraud, but I don't mind engineering, but I felt like professor was more of a calling. And so the work itself, this could kind of tie into Maslow's actualizing, if you will. This usually pops up as number one or two as well. And then, of course, the ability to grow, not just in the job, but as a human being at work. And then, do we really feel like we're achieving something that's for not just ourselves, but we're producing a product or services that benefit society as a whole? So here's how this goes. If these are present, we could finally get to a satisfied employee. But we're not going to really care about this if we're not paid well. We have dysfunctional relationships, our policies unjust or unfair. Any questions on Herzberg? So again, I'm a Herzberg nut, but I also realize that this isn't foolproof, if you will, or it's not perfect. Because some of you might say now relationships should be a motivator, but in general, I love this breakdown, how these are two different continuum, if you will. Any thoughts on that, or Oh yeah, psychologist's daughter. Well done. I like org psychology. That's like my favorite thing to study, but yeah, I teach management theory mostly. Talks approach versus avoidance, motivation, gap and gain. SNL sketch on Zillow cracks me up. That's great. Uh yeah. Okay, I hope this makes sense. I always think of it this way. I play music and I'm a drummer, which is kind of a musician. And I liken this to like the bass player of a song. Like when most people listen to music, they don't really go, oh, that bass and the drums are locked in. The rhythm guitar is on point. They usually know the lyrics or the front person of the song. They're singing something that like, it's like getting them going. It connects with them in some way. But if the foundation, the rhythm is off, then the song will be trash. So you can't connect with the singer if like you don't have that groove, the pocket. So you need both. And so this idea, however, you can't just have a groove and motivate somebody. You also have to have the lead singer connecting piece. So I'm a huge analogy person. So if I'm over analyzing things or something, just let me know. The house brick visualizations are the things at the bottom stressors. Yeah, yeah. So just think of the bricks just as the foundation of a house. So like if you were on Zillow, most people are not going to look for houses with good foundations. Now, I look at roofs. I don't want to but that's me. I like a roof that's simple and if it goes bad, but my wife doesn't look at the roof. She likes other things. But the crack, so the foundation, just think of this as like the foundation of a house. Nobody gets pumped about that when you live there. You take it for granted. But if the house, the foundation leaks, it's really hard to think about the cool things about your house. This is going to absorb, or it's going to take over in a bad way. So you want to have, for example, if you have bad policy, you'll start getting a crack in the foundation. If you have dysfunctional relationships, we're going to get cracks that need to be fixed. If our salary isn't keeping up with cost of living, crack. So these, but if we fix the cracks and then we can make these positive, at the end of the day, it's still not going to make us happy. But these things will make us happier, if you will, but not until these are fixed. So again, most bosses try to motivate with these, which is good start, but you also have to have these built in. It's like you have to have both. So again, if you're going to pay someone better today, as we looked at our labor participation, well, they can go get better pay anywhere compared to when I graduated in '04. So salary can temporarily get someone going, but they're going to have to connect at a deeper level with something else. Like, do they actually think what the company does is legitimate? Does their job actually matter to society? Are they respected and so on? I hope that makes sense. Oh yeah, I'm seeing. Okay, you're not seeing my mouse. Yeah, I got the mouse going all over the place. Sorry, but I thought you could see that. So sorry about that. Okay, so again, just to tie this up, and then we'll move on to the next idea here. So fixing the foundation again. I keep thinking you can see my mouse. I keep moving it around. Fixing the foundation does not lead to satisfaction again on the left. You can't work on the house on the right. Again, nobody would work on something, a paint job on their house if your foundation was leaking. Like that would take priority, the foundation shifting. So again, the big thing is if you could think about your jobs, policy wise, if there's something that's like, for example, I've seen some colleges do away with tenure. Um, and again in this industry that's kind of a big deal. I get why they're doing that. They're trying to what have you. I know most industries don't have that, but again if you're in this industry that's kind of something that you would take for granted, and then if that was pulled away that would be like whoa. So that would be just like a company policy example. But then again once I have tenure, am I just super motivated once I get it? Well, no. It's kind of like a taken for granted in this industry. So again, the things that really get me going at the end of the day, I like publishing things, writing, that's a need for achievement. I like teaching, that's the work itself. I think I'm growing as a person. My students challenge me. I think what I do matters. So everything on the right is going. However, there are times, and again, I don't want to say which ones because you guys know I work at Milligan now, but we'll just say there's some things on the left that aren't perfect. So that does detract from the thing on the right. So if you're looking at the left, there are some things where I work. Now we have tenure. And again, I'm not going all in on that, but there are some things on the left that I would say are not, there's some cracks there, but they're not bad enough where I'm like, okay, I've got to like, jump ship. But I would like some of those things addressed. So no company's perfect. So I don't know of anyone that's got everything on the left perfectly fixed, or if you're checking all the boxes on the right. However, here's what I would say. Some of you say you're burned out. Most likely, again, if you're doing something you love, so on the right, say those are the things on the right. So the house, like you're doing something you love. Let's say you're a volunteer somewhere. Something on the left still might be wearing you out, though, even though you're trying to do that. So most likely the burnout is still from the left side, but I don't know. I don't know of anyone that I think we could still get burned out from recognition to think of it. Like imagine your boss gave you a pat on the back every hour. That would be ridiculous. But so that would probably be too much. But again, generally speaking, I'd say the left burns us out. And I'll open this up for time at the end here. I know I'm about half hour here, and I don't think I'll go that long. Okay, this is just the note. In a 2014 study, the Boston Consulting Group, so I know we're 10 years old, but this study is massive, so I wanted to put it out there. Again, we're not really at the Gen Z here, more probably the millennial Gen X. But Boston Consulting Group surveyed over 200,000 people around the world. And what they found, number one, and you could say recognition/respect was the number one motivator across culture. So even if you throw Herzberg out, respect was number one. Again, I would say though, even if you're respected at work, foundational cracks or not feeling the other side, the house side would still not this. I don't know if this alone, I don't think you could take one of these alone and just run with it. Like, hey, I'm recognized, just recognize everyone, and that's what we're going to do. It's more holistic than that. Interpersonal relationships, number two. Again, that one's technically a hygiene factor. If we go back, these are called hygiene factors, the foundation hygiene factors. Work-life balance. This was before COVID, of course, 6 years before. Work-life balance was on there. Supervision, job security, number 5 and 7. Personal growth, number 6. Salary, the work itself, and then 10 would be like company values and culture. So you could look at these in the way of Herzberg, and these are kind of all over the study. If you're looking at what causes employee happiness, this wouldn't perfectly align with Herzberg, but they're at least all in the model. Like you see personal growth, for example, right here on the right. You would see supervision on the left. You would see salary on the left. So again, they at least fit in the model. But anyway, I don't know on this list, is anyone a number one as far as like if you had to wait, like where should you spend your time motivating me? Would be recognition number one. My I don't know if I have my mug. Oh, it's back there. You can almost see it. You can almost see it. There's a white mug behind me, but it says Employee of the Month runner up. I was really excited when I first started reading it, and then the runner up really got to me. But that was a good recognition piece there. Number 3, okay. Yeah, in number 3, I think work-life balance, though. Again, I don't know if work-life balance would motivate long term. I need work-life balance myself. I have kids and it's a busy season in life, so I need that. But however, most companies are doing that now, so I don't know if it would motivate me in this job environment. I need it for sure. So, but I don't know if that motivates me, but I would say I absolutely need the number 3. It's like almost a given for me. I have to have it. It's tough to do. Yeah. And again, this was 10 years ago, this study, but yeah, I loved it. It was 200,000 people. That's like a massive study. Yeah, I would agree, Sarah. Balance is foundational these days. That's what I was saying. Um, again, I would say too, though, it could motivate some of us. But yeah, today I would say it's more of a we need that. And I'm always for more salary, don't get me wrong, regardless of the theory, bring it on. Um, I want to talk about, I did a couple studies myself. So I did one study on the left like 5 years ago. I created a survey that's in the book called the UDS, the Universal Dual Factor Survey. So you could survey your employees with it. Or you could just follow the model from this presentation, which is what I did on the right. I actually used two-factor on the right, the small pool company. So I want to talk about both studies really quick. So on the left, there's a mid-sized bank in the Southeast United States. And I got their human resources to do a Qualtrics survey, and then I used the survey that I built off two-factor theory. So if you in the book, for example, I have questions, like 3 questions or so regarding each one of these. So recognition, advancement, achievement, relationships, and so on. And then I surveyed employees at this bank to see kind of like what gets you satisfied at work. I only looked at jobs, does it relate to job satisfaction? So at the end of the day, 106 surveys were usable. I had more come back, but some people got bored in the study. And I also looked at personality theory too. So I looked at, did the big five predict anything? But I'll leave that out for now. We'll just stick on the two-factor here. Work itself. So in the bank of 106 people that responded, the work itself was the most important predictor of job satisfaction. So if I had to guess, if I was just walking around, I'd say in general, they like the work itself. If they like the work itself, they're happy. The second one was recognition, which we talked about being number one across cultures. It showed up, which was nice. Those were the only two that actually statistically speaking were related to job satisfaction from a prediction standpoint. So if I was going to use a predictive model, here's another. So if I use the correlation matrix, what was interesting is that age. So the older you were, this is generational, I would say, the older you were, the more satisfied you were. And it was related to also, did you feel like you were achieving anything and you were happier with salary? Now, that could be many things. Like you could have worked there for a while and you get paid more. Maybe you know more about the banking industry, but which was interesting is the older you were, that related to if you were happier at work and if you felt like you were achieving and you were happier with salary. And age was negatively related to supervision. In other words, the younger you were, the more likely you were to not be happy with your supervisor. So these things here were all kind of related to each other. But if I was just going to predict job satisfaction in general, like what's going to make people happy at this bank, it'd be the work itself, making the work itself meaningful, and recognition are the most important too. But the age things were interesting. Now the small pool company was a few months ago. And what happened was someone had me come in. I think he has like 12 employees. No, well, 15 employees, I think 15 to 20, somewhere in there, but about 11 to 12 kind of pool construction, doing the linings and stuff. And then of course, some were administrators. It's a small company in the Southeast US. He had me come in more of a consulting role, and he goes, I want to know how to make my employees happier. And I'm like, are you sure you have 11% turnover in the pool/construction industry? They have over 50% turnover. And he's like, I need to figure this out. And I'm like, this is the time for Herzberg. And I put up the the Herzberg sign. This is time for Herzberg. So what I did is I went in and so when Herzberg did his study back in the 50s, Herzberg basically interviewed like engineers and accountants in Pittsburgh and basically just asked, what do you like about your job? What don't you like? Very qualitative, open-ended questions. And that's how two-factor emerged. He kind of categorized their responses. So I kind of did the same thing. I just went to each person, kind of like, hey, tell me what you like and don't like about working here. And I was even trying to pull stuff out of them. Like, seriously, like there's got to be some stuff that's wrong. Like, and so what happened was, of everyone I interviewed, here's what they said. So here's the biggest things they cared about the pool company. One is they were paid well. They actually have benefits and their hourly rate was not even close to what the other pool companies in the area were. So that's obviously important. That they have benefits in construction, and doing that that kind of work, normally you don't even, that's a tough sell, and the owner's like, I won't sacrifice that. So and he's like, we're also known for the quality pool company, so we do charge the customer more to do this, because like we fix other people's problems, and so that's how he had his margin to cover that. But that was a big thing, obviously. This next thing with this pool company was that he made this rec center, which of course people were excited at first and then got bored with it, but it's amazing. But he has his story on the wall and pictures. So like it was a family run business for years. He came in basically like in 2015 and didn't even want to run it. And he had to learn it from the ground up, was like shoveling out pools and digging them out by hand. And then, he turned the company around, but then it's like all of his employees are part of this story. So the power of story is important. So they say they like that aspect of it. So he did build this rec center, and there's pictures all over the wall and stuff. But again, people get bored with that, just like anything else. They're like, well, I can walk in there after a few months, like, okay, they have pool tables in there, but whatever. Um, but they do like that. But again, recognition, he says I always recognize for my hard work. We have celebrations. He sends people like on cruises, I believe, for certain milestones, work anniversaries, always has birthday parties. And so they all felt recognized. He knows them by name. So recognition that tied into job security. Nobody mentioned job security, but everyone's like, in general, if they work hard and do their job, he feels like they're going to be taken care of. And they also felt like they worked for the best pool company in the city. So that would be job security. Most liked the job they were doing. A few wanted growth opportunities, they said. So some were like, hey, I'm a pool salesperson or a spa sales, but I really want to know the business more. So that came up. Supervision, there were some cracks on supervision, communication problems, getting sent to jobs that weren't like properly scoped, but generally speaking, supervisors cared about them, so they felt good about it. Again, I mentioned pay and benefits, work-life balance. If anyone had a family thing that came up, they could always leave. So, and they all got 2 days a week off, even in the busy season. So, like when the customer's yelling at them, like in June, I want to need my pool cleaned. He sticks to his guns. They get Sunday and Monday off. So that was big. And then of course they most like working together. There was one kind of rogue employee that wasn't happy at all, and he left and went into real estate anyway. Um, so there was one that wasn't happy, and then not everyone was perfectly happy. But generally speaking, for this industry, most people were like, "This is great." And so those were the kind of two studies. One was qualitative. Again, I interviewed every single employee for like 20 minutes and then kind of categorized it by Herzberg. And then the other one was quantitative survey method. But of course, recognition popped up in both. I'm almost done, and then we can do questions. I want to talk a little bit about engagement, and then I'll check the chat. Most of you have probably heard engagement versus motivation, and I know there's librarians in here that don't want me to violate copyright, so I just attached to a link, and I hope this is not violating copyright. My librarian would be all over me if I was print screening it. Okay, so this is a engagement model on the left, and so I don't know if I can minimize this, but engagement's all the rage these days, and they say motivation's old hat. So I don't know, I don't think I can squeeze that in there. But if we take a look at motivation, and then we got in the background Herzberg, notice how motivation theory today is actually going back to this foundational piece. So like Herzberg, we do have, like, again, this is my view of it, this foundation. You could say the blue is like this and the green is like that. Motivation today, what we see is kind of like reimagined kind of Herzberg factors. Like, for example, leadership and supervision's on here. We see like diversity inclusion, but I would almost call this like working conditions. Like this could be a subcomponent of working conditions or relationships. Some of these are new, maybe. Let's see, brand. I don't know. I'll maybe put this in like, because job security is on here too. I don't know, there's a lot of overlap. Like rewards and recognition are on there, job security is on here, feedback's on here, job satisfaction, work-life balance. There's a lot of overlap. I would say though, why I like Herzberg more is that you can't motivate with the foundation alone. Now they put the work in the foundation in engagement model, so this is different than Herzberg. And I know this is a lot to take in if you haven't studied this theory, unless you're the
I'm
psychologist.
sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
we can't see what you're talking about. We can only see the slide with the Herzberg stuff on the right.
Oh, okay. The chat's blowing up. I think I know how to do this. I was trying to not violate copyright, but it cost me you guys not being able to see stuff. Let me see. How about this? Is that okay? Can you see it? Anyone? Let me see the chat. Okay. Well, I hope you guys could see this now. Do I have new chats? Okay, we can see it. Okay. All right. Just rest assured copyright is not violated. So this is like engagement model. So if you see the blue, this is kind of like foundation. However, they put the work itself. You see there on the bottom right, the work. If you look at Herzberg, if you look at Herzberg's work, he puts that as a motivator. I'd say these green ones are more like motivators. I still think engagement theory is very much overlapped with Herzberg. The main difference in terms, so I think this is important. Engagement looks at like getting employees that are like all in for their company, which I don't even know, ethically speaking, like I'm just thinking out loud here, but like if I hire somebody contractually, I expect you to do the job, and I'll pay you accordingly. And of course, it could go more than that, but like, should I expect employees to make every after activity, and be engaged at that level, and have a sign for their company in the yard and where I don't know. I just don't know. Again, on that side of things, because that's what engagement's getting at. Where satisfaction, Herzberg's like, do they like the job or not, which will lead to less turnover and so on. Engagement's more about all in. I don't know. Again, I don't know. I struggle a little bit on that engagement piece. Not that you don't want engaged employees, but I don't know if that should be an expectation that I don't know, that they're totally all in. But anyway, that's why engagement's considered better than job satisfaction, but I don't know if I buy it. So anyway, Herzberg has the foundationals like in the blue, which are different. But I don't know, are there any comments on this engagement drivers? Like again, I don't want to, I'm almost out of time. I was going to have some questions at the end here, which but as far as this blue goes, I think job security for sure, like nobody gets thrilled about it, but it's important. Kind of like the last study I did, where I interviewed people, like nobody came out and said job security is why I love this pool company, but it was implied. Like we're the best pool company in the area. We do, and then of course the work we do is better than the competitor. So they like the job. Um, and so I still think job security is good. I think the work itself is still a motivator. Um, but again, engagement gets into more like how do you get people all in on the company itself? And again, I would argue even diversity and inclusion is an expectation. I don't know if people get thrilled about that. I'd say this is like the right thing to do, area. So I don't really know on that. Like, again, I'm just speaking like off the top of my head here. I would just think of we have fair policies. If you tie this into policy, that's something that should be like part of, the policy should be fair and just. So I don't know, people get pumped for that. It's like an expectation, but maybe. And then senior leadership, like I was saying, nobody really gets pumped for their leaders normally. But incompetent leaders can hinder. So anyway, that would be I would say that engagement and motivation are very much overlapping and they just view things differently. But anyway, let's go. Oops. I don't know if I got cut off or if I did that, but let's see. I might have. Done that to myself. I'll just finish with one last slide and then we can open it for discussion, if you guys would like. And again, you're probably looking, I don't know what version of my screen you're looking at, but this is just the conclusion, so we're all fine, then we can chat. So my conclusion, so I know I hurried through two-factor, so we can talk here, but two-factor I think is still relevant today, even though it came out in the traditionalist era. But the reason we're bored at work and need motivation theory is the standardizing of jobs, in my opinion. We went through the Industrial Revolution. We all became kind of cogs in the machine. We get bored. Most of us aren't experts at anything like from start to finish. Now professor life is different. Like I hit a lot of job skills I like, but generally like most jobs I have, I was always doing one little part of a whole. And it was, it gets repetitious, it gets boring. Even professor life gets boring. So I don't know. I think that's a big part of it is the industrialization, but I still think it's relevant today. The hygiene factors, the foundation of the house, and the motivators both need to be addressed by management. Usually the easiest things for managers to focus on are the things they can measure. What's that? Salary, work accidents at work. It's hard to measure internal motivation unless you survey people. And then a lot of bosses don't want to do that because then they're like, ooh, I had one company that was steering away from, I was trying to, when I was doing my bank study, I was trying to get into different companies. You could tell somewhere like, we don't want to ask employees how they feel right now. So it's easier to quantify external usually. And so most managers will focus on the hygiene factors, but you also need to somehow address motivators, internals. And then finally, management cannot motivate with hygiene alone, like I said. But if any of you want to follow up, I do talk about this. Again, who doesn't have a podcast these days? I only do like one a month, maybe every 6 weeks now. But I talk a lot about this psychology and business stuff on there. And so there you have it. But I'm all done. If we have time for questions, I don't know what Ellen wants me to do, but that's it for the presentation part.
Yes, there is some time for questions.
Okay, and I know there's a lot of things in the notes, but if anyone wants to ask like verbally, that would be awesome. That way I'm not just, you don't see me reading notes or the chat. Let's see. I'm just scrolling through the chat. I'm just trying to see. Yeah, I like this comment. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I like this comment. I think when engagement becomes mandatory, it's no longer engagement. Like I've been made to feel guilty at times for not attending certain things. And I'm like, well, that wasn't, I mean, I do that when I can, but I can't like make everything.
It was interesting to me that salary is not a motivator because it seems like it is definitely a dismotivator. People will just be like, well, I'm not getting paid to do that, or I'm just gonna like work to the rules and only stick to that and not do anything more than that. So it's interesting that salary doesn't motivate but can unmotivate.
Well, yeah, and I think too, if you like incentivize things, like let's say that we wanted to incentivize engagement. Again, I'm thinking out loud here, as I'm just like this, so I could be wrong. But let's say we incentivize engagement, like every activity I show up to at work, I get some kind of incentive. Would I really be engaged? Now, of course, it would look like it, but then it just becomes work. And again, I'm not saying, I know Herzberg's theory does say salary is not a motivator. Personally, I think there's some blurred lines. I don't think it's not, it can be, but again, most people after a few months aren't still thrilled about their salary. It's like they take it for granted. I don't know if I'm wrong. I could be wrong. So go ahead and disagree, anybody. It's again, none of these theories are an island. Oh, thanks for dropping that in the chat, Regina. I was gonna try to get to that. But yeah, I don't know if that answered anything or not, but that's anyone else?
Well, I was thinking about Ellen's salary comment, and there's the I think like, traditional work safety and, not having the machines that we're going to fall into and lose our fingers. I think I think we're kind of expecting it at this point, at least, if you're working fast food, you don't expect a good salary. But if you're in a professional job, you probably go into it saying, okay, this is a salary I can live on. So it's not your hugest motivation. Especially, if you're doing the job for other reasons. I mean, we all need to pay bills and eat food and all of those things. But so I suspect it's one of those things like, okay, it's a diversity and inclusion, workplace safety, salary is supposed to be reasonable. And also, and I think some jobs, if I was making, $300,000 as a librarian, I'd be going, okay, this is a lot of money, but I'm a little nervous about this level of a wage. So I think it's one of those things where you're looking at the whole picture and you expect a living wage, but there's all these other factors that may be slightly more important than just the salary.
Yeah, and to tie into what you're saying, Julia, is Nicole's writing. I think again, this is just one guy's opinion here. If we're working a job where we can't support our family, again, if we're just looking to survive, we're going to try to find a job that meets our needs. So that's definitely the case. So, but you're not going to worry about the internal motivators. Like, for example, imagine there's some job you love to do. Let's just say it's a librarian. And let's just say that in your area, they're just not paying enough to make ends meet. Well, you're going to have to you have to survive. So you can't get to your internal motivators until that need is met. Now, again, that's back to Maslow, obviously. But that's kind of where I would think that the foundation goes, because like you wouldn't be motivated by your salary. You just need it to live. And so again, it's not, you're motivated to live, but you're not necessarily fulfilling anything internally other than survival. So like and I think it's like, there's this survey, like how much do you need to make a year to be happy? And at some point it tails off. It's like, I don't know if it's 75, 100,000 in today's dollars, who knows? Let's say it's 100,000. Once you make 150,000, 200, then it's like, you're just chasing the wind. But if you're not making ends meet, you're definitely not going to be happy. I mean, you just got to get it. I'm not happy, but you know what I mean? I don't know if that helps, or again, that would basically be the foundation being cracked. The salary is not good enough, so therefore you can't care about the job because the foundation's cracked. I was just trying to respond to the salary comments. And again, he could be wrong. Herzberg could have been wrong, so. But I still think there's a lot of it that's true. Anyone else? If not, you can have a few minutes off before your next presentation. Oh, interesting. So Nicole's saying, yeah. And again, I would say that these aren't perfectly dichotomous. So yes, I do. Yes. But but that livable wage, I totally feel, I've definitely been it there. And so I get that, that I think it would eat away at you, even though you're motivated, it would still chip at you. So it would still be, again, I think, just thinking this out loud again, if you have cracks in your foundation, if you have too many, I think it would be hard to be motivated. But I still think that would chip away at you some, I'd say. So it's not a perfect theory, but I love it. So I'm a Herzberg nut. Yes. Yep. Scott. All right. I mean, if you guys are good, unless Ellen wants me to hang on, I don't know what you guys want me to do. If you guys want a break.
If there are no other questions, I'd like to thank Dr. Ward for his time. It was a very interesting way to look at our jobs, somewhat unusual. And I, for one, definitely learned some new things. So thank you very much for your time. And I hope you have a great day.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank
Thanks
you.
thanks for interacting. It makes it better. So.
And we invite those of you who are still here to stay tuned for our next session, which starts at 10:15. Thanks, everyone.